Welcome to the TechTalk Business Process Catalog. My name is Eva and I will be moderating this session. And now let's get started. Our presenter today is Rachel Profitt, who's Principal Program Manager with Microsoft. Over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Eva, and thank you everyone for joining us today in part 2 of our Tech Talk series, all about the Business Process Catalog guidance. Today, we're going to be deep diving into the Business Process Catalog. So let's do some quick introductions for those of you that don't know me. Again, my name is Rachel Profitt. I'm a Principal Program Manager here at Microsoft, and I do have my contact information here on the slide. I do invite you to reach out to me with any questions that you might have at my email address. You can find my blog at dynamics365lady.com. Connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn at Rachel Profitt, and you can find me on YouTube at Dynamics365 Unboxed. The QR code that you see here on your screen takes you right to my LinkedIn page if we're not already connected. Like I said before, this is a Tech Talk series, and this is the second Tech Talk in a large series of Tech Talks that are going to dive into the details of all things related to the Guidance Hub and business processes. Here on the screen, you can see the first 5 parts of the series that are planned and scheduled, and we'll be working to add at least 15 more Tech Talks into the series for each of the end-to-end processes. Our first Tech Talk, which was 2 weeks ago, introduced you to the Guidance Hub and all the different types of resources that are available. In today's session, we'll be focusing on the Business Process Catalog. In the next Tech Talk, which will happen after the first of the year, we're going to be detailing out more about how you can import the catalog into Azure DevOps and use it for scoping and estimating your projects. Then our last 2 sessions will specifically be about how to author business process guides. So let's switch gears a little bit and take a closer look at what we are planning to cover today. In today's session, I am going to be introducing you to business processes, what they are, why they're important, and walking you through the process for downloading the catalog, how to navigate around the catalog, and how you can find guidance for each of the rows that are in the catalog, and how to navigate what's included in those documents that we're creating related to the catalog. So we do encourage you to ask your questions throughout the session, but we will dedicate some time at the end for your questions. And with that, let's go ahead and get started by starting to talk a little bit about business processes. So I wanted to start out today with a definition. Business processes are a series of structured activities and tasks that organizations use to achieve specific goals and objectives. Business processes are a kind of a global concept that are used by every organization. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why business processes are important. And we've gathered a handful of reasons here. This is by no means a comprehensive list of every reason why business processes are important, but these are just some of the most top of mind items for me. So first is efficiency and productivity. When we have well-defined processes, they can significantly improve organizational efficiency and productivity of your workers. Second is consistency and quality. When we have standardized processes, it helps to ensure that those processes are consistent in your operations, and it can help organizations maintain a high level of quality in the products or services that they're offering. Thirdly, we have cost reduction. When processes are optimized, it can lead to cost reductions through resource optimization and waste reduction. Next is risk management. When we document processes well, it can help organizations identify and mitigate risks in their business operations. Next is scalability. Scalable processes allow organizations to adapt to changing demands and growing their operations. And lastly is data-driven decision-making. Data-driven processes provide valuable insights for better decision-making in an organization. And when we have good processes, those decisions can be made off of good data, and we can make better decisions. So I want to talk a little bit next about what is business process modeling. Business process modeling is a process that, from a fast track perspective, we recommend that every organization goes through whenever they're implementing a Dynamics 365 technology. Honestly, it should apply to any technology that you're implementing, but the process involves a graphical representation. That's typically flowcharts. The level of detail in your charts and your processes might vary depending on the stage of your project that you're in. But when we go through the process of business process modeling, we're creating descriptive details that help us track the process. So it's a type of documentation that helps us describe, usually visually, what the process looks like. But it's also prescriptive, meaning how should we execute a particular process? What are the steps that we need to take? And they're also prescriptive in the sense that they provide the rules and guidelines for how that process should function. It's, there's decision boxes that you add into a typical business process flow. When we think about the 3 layers, what you see on the left-hand side at the top, we have the business and company research at the top level. So when we start a project, right, we might start with a very high-level picture of what is that business all about? What is that company all about? And so we start by documenting the basics of that business. At the next layer down, we have industry practices and processes. So depending on the type of organization and specific processes within that organization, we start to get a more detailed look at how a particular process looks. And then towards the end of your project, as you're getting ready to go live, like you're in your user acceptance testing or UAT phase of a project, we have a configured solution. And so your business process modeling is a continuous process that's constantly gathering more detail, but we always start with this process and gradually get more detailed. So why is business process important when we think about business applications? Everything that Dynamics 365 does is about enabling business processes, and an organization's ability to understand how those business applications support their own business processes is a key factor in the success of their implementation. But you might be wondering, where are Dynamics 365 business processes documented? So we're going to start with a little history lesson of business processes. Before we started our project, there was no public process catalog. Internally, our ISD implementation team had a partial catalog that they used and based their projects on. And finance and operations tried to leverage the APQC inside of the business process modeler within LCS, but it didn't get great adoption. Oftentimes, partners will also roll their own. So it's not uncommon that many partners have their own process framework that they've developed over time. But not all partners use processes as a basis for their implementation. And when we think about how our product documentation out on Learn is organized, it's siloed. So all of the Microsoft content is organized by the different applications. And the docs are largely feature-oriented with a few process themes here and there. But many customers use multiple products or a mixture of products. And so sometimes navigating that documentation and understanding the why of the products and features we offer can be difficult. And Success by Design, which is the framework that we teach in our implementation guide, which is available out on Learn, teaches implementers that they need to base everything on a process framework, but up until this point, we've never provided one. So we set out to create a new business process catalog. And this is a snapshot of what we've done so far. So our first objective was to create a catalog. And we didn't want to use APQC because of the poor adoption that you might be familiar with if you are on the finance and operations side of things. But we had a few objectives when we were setting out to create the catalog. First and foremost, one of the things that we needed to do was we needed it to use business terminology and not software terminology. So when you look through our catalog, you'll find words that should make sense in just about any industry or any organization. We've tried to genericize the terminology in levels 1, 2, and 3 of our catalog as much as possible. We also wanted to make sure that the catalog could transcend product boundaries. In other words, we didn't want one for customer engagement apps and one for finance and operations apps. We wanted one big, giant, business-savvy business process catalog. And this catalog would become the baseline for our chapter in the implementation guide that's all about process-focused solutions. And of course, we needed to make sure that this catalog was available publicly so that everyone can use it. We are taking a crawl, walk, run approach with the catalog and the guidance that we're building around it. The way that we build it was we brought together a lot of different people in our Fast Track and ACE teams to help build the actual catalog. So we sat down in more than 21 sessions with more than 23 contributors and got to work. We started from the ISD catalog that they use internally to estimate their projects and how we drive implementations here at Microsoft. What we have now and what's available today is the latest version. It's the December version, and we have 15 end-to-end processes that we've identified across, and we've divided those 15 end-to-end processes down into 98 different process areas. Those process areas then break down into more than 600, nearly 700 individual processes and more than 2,000 patterns. And sometimes you'll hear us use different terms for patterns. Sometimes we might use the term pattern, and sometimes we might use the term use case or user story. They're kind of used interchangeably. So just good terminology to be aware of. You can access the catalog by using the AKA link that you see here on my screen, aka.ms/business process catalog. We'll be doing a demonstration of this shortly for you. It's important to note that we have actually moved the location of the catalog. That AKA link is the way to get there. The QR code that you see on my screen here on the right is the QR code that you can use to get directly to that link. And the files are now available in our download center. They used to be available, so if you accessed it before, it was in our GitHub repository. The GitHub repository is still there, and there's lots of things that will be stored there moving forward, but we moved the catalog to the download center so that we could monitor the number of downloads of those files. There are two formats of the file available. One is a standard XLSX file, Excel file, and the other is a CSV file, and the CSV file is the format and the template intended for uploading into Azure DevOps. If you do plan to load your file into Azure DevOps, we do have a Learn article that describes in details about how to use and how to import it into Azure DevOps. But part 3 of our Tech Talk series, which is the next one in the series, is going to be going into that in a lot more detail. So we won't be covering that in a lot of detail today. So what I wanted to go ahead and do is switch over and do a quick demonstration for you. So I'm here on in my browser. I've already navigated to it, but I'm just going to go ahead and type into the browser again so you can see it, aka.ms/business process catalog. That's the URL, and it will redirect you into the download center, right to the page where you can download these particular files. So right now we've got the December 2023 version. That one's pretty new. It was released last week. So if you haven't downloaded it since last week, this is a new version. So you can see that was published on 12/6. So you can see the details of exactly when it was published. As new versions are available, you'll see them out here along with the date that they are published. And you can see that there are 2 different files available. Currently, the file is only available in English. So if you switch to another language, like you'll notice when you click the drop-down box, you only get the English option. But when we click the download button, it will open a dialog. And here you can choose which file you want to download. If you'd like to download both of them, you can mark the checkbox I will tell you from testing and using this, sometimes it downloads both and sometimes it only downloads one. So if you're having trouble with downloading both files, then you can just do them one at a time. Once you click that download button, you'll see that it is actually like redirecting me to the second file. Because I already downloaded it earlier today, and I'm not going to navigate and show you how to use this in my browser. I've got it open, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. But because I've manually downloaded it already, if you are having trouble and it's not downloading and you're not getting the message, you can use this link here, click here to download manually, and then you get like the link in a column here where you can download manually as well. So if you are having trouble getting it downloaded, you can use either one of these. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about the catalog, and then I'll demonstrate kind of how to navigate this catalog for you. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about how the content is organized in the catalog. The content is organized into 4 levels. We have end-to-end processes, what we call business process areas, the actual business processes themselves, and patterns. So it's a hierarchy organized into 4 levels. The example here that I have on screen, which I will be demonstrating guidance pages related to these a little bit later on, is order to cash, is an example of an end-to-end process. We have 15 end-to-end processes. It includes things like acquire to dispose, case to resolution, order to cash, procure to pay, record to report. I'm not going to list them all out, but you'll be able to see all of those in the Guidance Hub and in the catalog. When we think about the areas, what we've done is we've taken order to cash and we've broken it down into logical areas. The areas aren't an actual process themselves, but rather a collection of processes to help make the catalog easier to navigate. So we've broken down order to cash. This is not a complete list, but as an example, we've broken it down into create and manage sales and monitor customer credit and collections. There's other things like invoicing customers, and I don't know the exact name of it, but there's another one for payments, just as an example. Then each one of those areas breaks down into several business processes. So business processes are the actual processes where there is a process, like by our definition, set of tasks that needs to be achieved to reach a specific goal or objective. And so you can see that there are different business processes. So like the example for create and manage sales, we show you here, sell products to customers, create cash and carry sales. And then we have set customer credit limits underneath, monitor customer credit and collections. There are many business processes underneath each area. This is just a small sampling for your information. And then below processes, we can have one or more patterns. Each business process should have at least one pattern, but oftentimes there are many patterns. Patterns is where we get to product-specific, industry-specific, scenario-specific, use case-specific ways to do a particular process. So they're variations on the process. Where the process is the overall general way we achieve something, a pattern is a specific way to do it. Like if you turn on this parameter and you check this option and choose this in the drop-down box, that's how you achieve this process for a particular scenario. So setting customer credit limits, as an example, I've shown 2 patterns here. We can manually set a customer credit limit, or we can set a customer credit limit for a group of customers. This isn't a comprehensive list of all the ways that we can set credit limits, but it's just some examples. We do know that the list of patterns that are available in the spreadsheet is not complete. And this is one of the areas that we would like the community to help us build out a larger list of patterns. And you can do that by submitting your request in the GitHub repository. There is an AKA link for that, which is aka.ms/business process catalog requests. That's where you can actually make requests for changes to the catalog. So we encourage you to go out there and make requests, suggest any ideas for features, etc., that you might have. So what I want to do next is talk a little bit about process-driven solution architectures. So this is another view of the hierarchies with end-to-end processes, process areas, business processes, and scenarios. Sometimes you'll hear us refer to the different levels of the hierarchy by their level. So L1 equals end-to-end, L2 equals business process areas, L3 equals the business processes, and L4 are those patterns or scenarios. We have another example here in the center of the slide showing a record to report example. So again, it's not a comprehensive example, but it's showing another sample of how that might look for an end-to-end process. But what I want to talk about here is the implementation column on the far right-hand side of this graphic. When we think about how these processes map to your implementation and how they map into Azure DevOps, and we'll talk more about this in detail in our next Tech Talk, we recommend that your level 1 end-to-end processes map to area paths. You could also consider creating a custom work item type if you want better organization, but just know that when you create custom work item types in Azure DevOps, then the out-of-the-box reporting doesn't really consider that hierarchy or that level. You can also use them as like dimensions or tagging to make things easier to find. Level 2, what we recommend there is that you create level 2 as epics, and it shouldn't say nested epics. We don't actually recommend that you use nested epics. So nested epics, while Azure DevOps supports it, it actually makes the reporting more difficult inside of Azure DevOps that's available out of the box. If you do create nested epics, just realize that you'll likely have to do some custom reports to be able to effectively report on that information. But you could also include these in your dimensions and tags. Level 3 maps to features, and level 4, we recommend that you map those to user stories. These are assumptions that you're using the agile methodology inside of Azure DevOps. Obviously, there are other templates that you can use in Azure DevOps, like the CMMI. So these recommendations are based on using the Agile template inside of Azure DevOps. It's what we use internally here at Microsoft. Although we don't use a full, true Agile approach to our implementations, it's a little bit more of a hybrid. We'll talk more about that later, though, in future Tech Talks. We also recommend that at the scenario level that you link these to configuration work items. So those would be work items that you create to track all the configurations that you're doing, your test cases, and any documentation deliverables that you create. So differentiating, I want to, what is the business process guide versus what is the catalog? So the guide is based on the catalog of business processes that are supported by all of the Dynamics 365 applications. The purpose of the guide is to actually give you the documentation on the structure and patterns of the processes, along with guidance on how to use them in a process-oriented implementation. So the catalog itself is just a list of processes, and there's lots of ways that you can use it. We'll have more Tech Talks in the future talking about that in more detail. But the guidance that goes with it there's two pieces. We have our implementation guidance, which is organized by the phases of your project. It tends to be a little bit more technical oriented in nature. That's also, though, where you'll find our process-oriented solutions chapter in the implementation guide. And then we have our business process implementation guidance. And so all of this content is available out in the Guidance Hub, which you can find at aka.ms/1guidance. So what does the catalog contain? When you download the spreadsheet, there are a number of columns. So the first thing that you'll notice, the very first column in the spreadsheet is a work item type. The work item type is actually used to help us map for the Azure DevOps version of the catalog. And the values that you'll see in that column are area paths, epics, features, and user stories. And those directly map to the business processes. So area paths equal end-to-end, epics equal areas, features equal processes, and user stories equal patterns. You'll also notice a sequence column in the spreadsheet. In our Azure DevOps template, we've mapped that sequence into a column for the process sequence ID in Azure DevOps. It is a unique number that is assigned. And what we've tried to do is give it the most logical sorting or the sequence that you would do steps in. Keep in mind, though, that a sequence it's linear. And many of these processes are not linear. They might be parallel or lateral in nature. So where processes are not linear, we've just tried to put them in the best order that we can, but we know that it's not perfect. If you have suggestions for changing those, do let us know. And we can let you know what we think of that suggestion, and we might make changes to our sequence and our numbering. And the last column in the spreadsheet is the state. There is also a comments column right now. I don't think that there are many comments in it, but as we start making changes to the catalog in new versions moving forward, you might see more comments in there. So published means it is the same since the last version. For the current version in December, we have set all of the rows to published. So moving forward, that state column, you'll see either updated or new. Updated will indicate that we've made a change to that particular row, and new means it's an added row to the catalog since the last version that we published. So the Guidance Hub is where all of the documentation related to each of these pages go. That Guidance Hub is the central landing spot for all of the guidance and tools, and we talked about the Guidance Hub in a fair bit of detail in part 1. So I encourage you to go watch part 1 if you missed it. The recording for that, it should have already been published, but they're having some backlog issues in the team, so it's not published yet. But it's where you'll find all of the cross-app documentation and all sorts of different content. If you want to learn more about what's available out there, I do encourage you to check out TechTalk number 1. And that's all found at aka.ms/1guidance. So what I want to do now is switch over and I'm going to show you a little bit about how to navigate the catalog and how to find that guidance. So I want to start with the normal Excel version. So I've got the Business Process Catalog December 2023 version open. When you are using the catalog, you'll notice that there are, the Excel version, there are filters across the top that make it easier to kind of navigate around. You'll notice a column, and I didn't mention this on the last one. There is a column G that tells you the article status. And so the article status tells you whether or not that article has been started or published, if it's in progress, etc. So that means, is the article even started or available? Any article that's not started, you are welcome to submit a request to start that, and we'll be talking more about that process for submitting in part 4 and 5 of our Tech Talk series. So oftentimes when you're navigating, you'll want to kind of narrow in on a specific end-to-end process. So what I've done here is clicked on the end-to-end business process filter, which is column B, and I'm going to go ahead and select just order to cash. So I unclicked the select all, and I'm clicking order to cash, which will drill me down to just see order to cash. If you want to see a list of, like, obviously, like right now, I'm seeing all of the different types. So if you wanted to see just what the business process areas are filtered down so that you don't see all the repeated rows in here, you can do that very easily by just selecting that you want the area paths and epics. And so there you can see it will give you a filtered down list where you can see these are the business process areas of order to cash. The sequence number is the sequence that they go in, that they're sorted. You can also see the article status. So some of them are published, some of them are in progress, and so on. We aren't currently using tagging and comments, but do expect that those will be populated. We might add additional columns to the catalog later on as well, but you can see that the catalog state is published. So these are all available in the December catalog, and there have been no change to these since the last version was released. I'm going to quickly switch over to the Azure DevOps version of the catalog and just show you what that looks like. Because this is a CSV file, it does not have any filters in it. If you're working on it and you need to add filters to it, you absolutely can. So I'm going to just quickly do that by going over to the Data tab in the Action pane and then clicking Filter, which adds those filters to the top. But keep in mind that when you save it as a CSV file, it will lose all of those properties. So again, if I want to filter down to a specific area, I can do that by looking for a specific business process. Now, you'll notice that there is no column here for end-to-end processes. So the best way to get to an end-to-end process, if you want to see just order to cash, for example, is to use the area path. So I'm going to stretch this out a little bit and choose just the order to cash area. So now you can see those. You'll notice that I do have 3 title columns, and this is normal. It's expected. They're organized in this hierarchy, and that's what enables them to be imported into Azure DevOps, where they actually retain their relationships when they're imported into Azure DevOps. So I'm going to quickly navigate back to the business process catalog, and I want to point out articles that are done will have, they'll say published. The names of the articles match exactly. So if I type in here, monitor, I'm going to copy and paste, monitor customer credit and collections, and I'm going to switch over to my browser now. And I'm going to go into the Guidance Hub. And so this is that aka.ms/1guidance. And I'm going to, basically, I'm just going to go into the business process guide. So I'm going to click on any one of these links. And once you're in the Guidance Hub, anywhere in here underneath the business process, and it doesn't matter if you're not in business processes, but if I paste this in to my title, because that is a published article, you'll notice that I can find it exactly because the article is named exactly what the file or the row is named in the spreadsheet. So that is monitor customer credit and collections. When you use the left navigation pane down the left-hand side, you'll notice we have end-to-end processes, and then our 15 end-to-end processes. Right now, there's only 14 here. Administer to Operate has not been published yet, but we will get Administer to Operate published soon. So there's only 14. They are organized alphabetically. So if I expand Order to Cash, you'll be able to see the end-to-end articles. So the end-to-end at the top level actually has 3 different articles related to it. So it's not a one-to-one relationship. But like invoice sales orders is an L2, as well as monitor customer credit and collections. So that's the article that I'm on right now. When we look at end-to-end articles, like I said, there's the 3, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this a little bit later on. But that's the easiest way to navigate back and forth and find the articles that are related from the catalog. All right. So what I'm going to do is we're going to switch back to our PowerPoints, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the guidance. What are the different articles? How are they structured? Who are they for? And that sort of thing. Then we'll do a demonstration and take a closer look at them. So end-to-end business process articles are for new consultants that are learning about business applications or business decision makers, trying to identify what Dynamics 365 can do for them. They are written at a level 100. and they primarily use business language, and they're very high level products and features that map to those processes. The purpose of these articles are to map products and features to benefits that can be understood in a business context. So when we take a look at what's included in an end-to-end article, like I said, there are 3 articles. We have the overview, the introduction, and the area overview. The overview articles include an overview of that process, the impact or the effect on the organization, who are the stakeholders, and what are the benefits. Basically, all of our articles have next steps and related resources, but when you go to the introduction article for an end-to-end, this is where you'll find a process relationship diagram and the flow diagram, along with descriptions of those flows. The area overview articles is basically a high-level overview of each of the business process areas that are part of the end-to-end process. So here you can see a sample of one of those articles. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this slide because we're going to go do a quick demonstration of that here shortly. What you see here on the screen is a sample of the end-to-end business process overview. This is one of the introduction slides. And then we also have the area overview. So it's basically headers for each one of the business process areas with a description. Once all of the articles are done for L2, these pages will have links to jump to the detailed page where you can get more information. The level 2 articles are like the monitor customer credit and collections as the example. These are written for new consultants that are learning about business applications. Again, they're for business decision makers who are drilling down to that next level. They're written at a level 200. And they use a combination of business language and basic dynamics terminology. Here, we're mapping those concepts to benefits, again, that can be understood in business context. You're not going to find a whole lot of how-to information. It's still more about the why of a particular and which products and which features at a more detailed level, along with those benefits. So here you can see a sample. This is that monitor customer credit and collections with all of the sections that are included in there. The screenshot doesn't see all of them, so I'm going to switch over and do a live demo for you here. The business process pages are where we can find the details of a specific business process. And so what I want to do is switch over, and I'm going to do a quick demonstration on the site of these pages so you can be familiar with how they're structured and where you can find information. So I'm here on the order to cash end-to-end introduction page. And all articles on the Learn site have like a table of contents at the top where you can jump down to a specific section. And so we give you an overview of what that is, what the impact is on the organization, who are the stakeholders that should be involved with this particular end-to-end process. And then we describe the benefits of using Dynamics 365 products to support these. We also give you next steps and related resources. And at the very bottom, that's where you'll see the contributors who wrote that article. Clicking on the overview article, which is the next one down in the left navigation pane underneath order to cash, this is where you'll see that overview. You can see the order to cash process relationship. We give you a description of how each of these processes are upstream and downstream, as well as some featured capabilities. This is by no means a comprehensive list of every single feature for order to cash, but these are some of the big ticket items, so to speak. And then an actual process flow, so you can see how order to cash relates to the other business processes. Below each one of our process flow diagrams, you'll see a description that describes what you see in the graphic, along with those next steps and contributors. Navigating down next to the business processes, we've got the overview of each of those. And you'll notice that some of these have links to other articles. Those could be product documentation. But as the pages are published, then we add links to those pages in here. And so that's where you can see those. I'm going to go ahead and drill down to monitor customer credit and collections, which is that level 2 document describing the business process area. And so these articles give you an introduction, how you can use Dynamics to support that process. Again, we've got the stakeholders and then a business process flow that is more detailed. All of the graphics can be clicked on to enlarge them on your screen. All of the graphics are also available for download in the GitHub repository. You can get right to that folder by navigating to aka.ms/business process flow, singular, not plural. And then at the bottom of those articles, again, those next steps and related resources. So I want to switch back before I dive into the business processes and talk a little bit more about what the business processes and patterns are for. So the business processes are designed for those consultants and business analysts that are learning about business applications or existing consultants, business analysts looking for best practices. They are written at a level 300 and they provide a specific set of tasks in a sequence that are required for achieving that objective, right? Because it is a business process. So it's like, how do I actually achieve that? It defines when each step is done in the implementation and how many are needed. The purpose of these articles is to provide considerations and best practices for implementing, providing technical information for implementing, and linking to product documentation to help you achieve the tasks that are required for that. And so here we have a sample business process page. But what I want to do is zoom in a little bit on an example of a solution table. So those solution tables provide those detailed steps that are required, including any of those prerequisites for setting up a process. So the tables are organized and they have several columns. And so what I want to do is explain these, but there is an article that you can find that has a lot more detail that I'm going to cover today about these tables and how to navigate around them. So process steps are sequential steps. They're organized into a table and you read and execute those steps from top to bottom. Each of the steps has a hyperlink to the product documentation. If you don't see a hyperlink, that typically means that product documentation does not exist for that particular step. We've tried as much as possible, avoid back and forth, but if there is some back and forth required, you'll notice a note below the table. Notes can also be used for exceptions or other things that we couldn't fit into the table to make it readable by the user. The next column in the table is process stages. Process stages actually have 3 pieces of information in them: project phases, configuration stages, and process types. So project phases align to the project phases of our implementation guide. So the options that you'll see there are strategize, initialize, develop, prepare, and operate. The configuration stages indicate like when or what type of configuration is this. Is it a base configuration, a foundational configuration, or optional? The article with the link at the bottom of the page here has more information about these definitions, but basically base means it's like required to operate the system, like it's mandatory, you have to have it. Foundational means it's foundational to a specific process, but it's not necessarily mandatory to operate the entire system. And then optional things are things that you don't need at all. You can still run a business process without doing it. And then we have 2 types of processes: configuration and operational. So I want to talk very quickly about process modifiers. We'll do a quick demonstration of these pages and then we'll switch over to questions. So process modifiers are designed to explain when and how a particular step in the table should be executed, and they indicate if you need one or more. The options that you'll see in there are early, gold, continuous, at least one, and multiple are recommended. Gold is a concept that's specific to finance and operation apps, so you won't see that in any customer engagement related processes or steps. But if you're not familiar with what a gold environment is for, we have more documentation available out there to explain that. The last column in these tables is the app navigation and entity column. So the application interface is a 2 to 4 letter abbreviation written in all caps. We don't use the term CE or F&O, and we have a whole list of what all those abbreviations are. But as an example, we use FIN to indicate finance, and we use SLS to indicate sales. Those are just a few examples. The navigation is how to navigate to that page from the main menu, and we put a greater than or a caret in between each of the clicks. And then we also include the entity. So we indicate if it's a DMF, so data management framework entity, or a DV for Dataverse entity with a colon, and then we tell you the system name of that entity. If there's more than one entity for a particular setup or configuration, we list them out with commas. So here on the screen, you can see a sample of a business process and a pattern. We describe the context and problem, but what I want to do is just quickly switch over, show a quick demonstration of this with the monitor customer credit and collections. So I'm going to drill down to set customer credit limits. This is where you can see that business process flow. And if we continue to scroll down in that article, this is where you'll see that table. There are multiple tables because there are multiple ways to do this with Dynamics 365. And then when you get to the bottom, you'll always have those next steps and related resources. This particular article has multiple patterns as well. So if I click on a pattern, you'll be able to see the context and problem, when and when you should not use that particular pattern, along with the solution. We give you links to the product documentation where appropriate, but we give you those step-by-step instructions to follow, along with any issues and considerations for implementing that particular feature at the bottom of the article. So with that, we do have a list of resources available for you, all the links that I've been giving you throughout today's session available on this slide. But let's go ahead and open it for questions.
Thank you very much, Rachel. There's a question about whether the catalog can be expanded with information like the version of the platform, since it's implemented, feature managed, and which one, link to technical objects, location in the product, security roles that can be used by design.
I think the question is asking if we are going to map these things to actual forms, classes, reports, etc., and so on. So the process itself doesn't necessarily map to one thing. As you saw, like in a step typically maps to one thing. We are planning to do more mapping of these business processes to engineering objects like forms, classes, reports, and so on. But like that's going to be a later phase. We have to get a little bit further along in the base documentation before we can take on this mapping. But it is part of our goal, and it's part of what will be technically required to support some of our other long-term goals of process mining, test suite automation, and some other things that we're hoping to do with the catalog later on.
Thank you. And there's also a question that's very much related. They would like to update projects that are already working with the business process catalog in Azure DevOps with a new version of the catalog. Is it possible to include a real unique identifier for a record in the catalog next to a sequence number?
So we are not planning at this time to put another unique identifier in there. So we need a lot more feedback that this is valuable to people to add something like that. The sequence numbers themselves are unique, and the actual names of the rows are unique. So either one of those could be used. Obviously, they aren't numbers. If having a unique number is important to you, I would suggest that you can download it and add a column yourself with a unique number, using a simple Excel formula. But at this point, we are not planning to put a unique number.
Thank you, Rachel. There's also a question about whether the business process catalog is going to replace the business process modeler in LCS.
The short answer is yes. The long answer, and we answered this in part 1 too. So yes, the business process modeler is going to be deprecated when LCS is deprecated. We are working on what the new version of business process modeler will look like. And business process modeler does a handful of things. It has Azure DevOps integration, the RSAT integration. It has the task guides, recording integration. It does a number of things. Not all of those things will land in the same place, but the actual catalog that you see with like APQC is being replaced with our catalog. But all the features and functionality that are currently available in the business process modeler will eventually be replaced. And the basis of what we're doing is all centered around the catalog.
Thank you. There was a question about whether Microsoft provides an Azure DevOps template that people can use on implementation projects that could benefit directly from this business process catalog.
So great question. There is a version of this catalog that can be imported into Azure DevOps, and we've provided guidance and documentation on custom columns and things to include. We are planning to continue to publish more guidance around this, and we're trying to determine how we can publish a full template, the template that we use internally, without you having to manually set those things up.
Yeah, so there's a question. Does the catalog contain the technical documentation, meaning developer helping docs? And I think the answer is no. That's in the product documentation.
Yeah. So the technical documentation about like integrations and things like that, you would find that in the developer documentation or the administrator documentation, which is all part of product documentation.
Yeah. Thank you. One last question is there an easy way to find and sort all processes, for example, related to finance or supply chain?
At this time, there is not, no, because, yeah, we are tagging all of the processes to the products, but there's not a way in the Learn site or in the spreadsheet to filter by a product that it's related to.
Precisely. Thank you. And then there was a question about whether there's a plan to cover commerce processes as well.
Commerce is part of the catalog.
I agree. And there was a related question asking about project-based organizations, whether they could find the catalog useful. And I replied with yes.
Absolutely. Project to Profit is where a lot of those project and service-based processes would live. Service to cash might also be useful because project-based organizations are oftentimes service-based. So obviously, project to profit and service to cash would be of particular interest.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I think that's all we have for today.
Thank you very much, Rachel. This concludes this session. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.